Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys for another episode of what is our Let's Talk Arsenal series. Joining you this morning at 8 a.m. This is a pre-recorded episode, not the usual 8 a.m. show because I'm at Mikel Arteta's press conference, and just like we did the other day with Clive, we had a good chat about things in much more upbeat circumstances. And so there's always one man I think to when to talk about more somber things, and that's Andrew, aka Arseblog. How you doing, mate? You good, Joel?
I'm good. I didn't know I had that reputation, when things are
You do
terrible,
now.
you gotta talk to me. Well, I do now. Thank you for having me. Well, to be fair, we'd organized this before it was
True.
before the game the other night. So
Yes,
yeah,
you've rumbled me there.
yeah,
So yeah, that's completely fair and a strong defense as well. I want to start by asking, how are you feeling about? I say last night. Obviously, this is going out on Friday morning,
yeah.
but because I always feel somewhat indifferent towards this competition sometimes because I don't want to see Arsenal lose, obviously, but I always see just so many benefits of not being involved in it. So how are you feeling this morning?
It's that weird one, isn't it? Where everybody before the game is, well, we've got to rest all our best players. Don't play Saka, don't play Rice, don't play Odegaard, don't play Martinelli, rest Saliba, all the rest of it. And nobody wants you to use those players in games like this because you've got a big game against Newcastle coming up. And then when you lose, everyone's like, we lost. It was terrible and all the rest of it. So it's a sort of double-edged coin in that sense. I mean, I think, like everybody, I think this is probably the lowest priority competition that there is in the season. But I do think that it's a trophy. And I think we as fans take this competition much less seriously than the players and the manager do. Or maybe not some of the players, as it turns out, but certainly the manager. He sees this as a piece of silverware. He sees this as a chance to win something, to be part of the process that he believes he needs to sort of build a winning team for the title. And, who knows, the Champions League, it's a long way off and all the rest of it. But I think that sort of winning culture that he wants to instill at the club means that you take every game seriously. And whether you rotate your team or whether you don't rotate your team or whether you use players off the bench or not, I think he expects a certain level from those guys on the pitch. And my feeling is, based on what he said afterwards, he didn't get what he was looking for. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair. I think that what was interesting in listening to him in his pre-match press conference where he says he lives this competition like it's the Premier League. And I think that's completely fair. And I don't think that he didn't do that by rotating. And I think that, as you mentioned, fans call on, some fans, I shouldn't generalize all of them, but some fans call upon rotation in heavy measure for these types of games. And I think there's certainly reason for that. You think about the end of last season where key players were missing due to injury, and it felt as though the players that came in to replace them hadn't been given enough minutes to that point to be fresh and fit and ready to fire an end of a title run. How did you feel when you saw the lineup with the 6 changes from the weekend? 6 changes kind of like, in a way, a mirage, because Kivior obviously started the weekend when he maybe wouldn't have done, as did Nketiah, who of course is starting because Gabriel Jesus is out. So how did you feel when you saw the lineup?
I mean, it was more or less what I had expected, to be honest. I thought he would change things around. We knew he was going to change the goalkeeper. I didn't think there was any rational explanation for picking Declan Rice for this one. Leave aside the fact that he's going back to his old club. You've got Newcastle on Saturday. Declan Rice has played a lot this season for Arsenal, played a lot this season for England. You're going up against basically the hardest running team in the Premier League the following weekend or the following game. So it didn't make sense to me anyway to play Declan Rice from the start in this one, because you want him as fresh as possible for that one. The other changes, Vieira, you've got to give him some game time. Nelson, you've got to give him some game time. Trossard's been on the bench a lot. He's been effective off the bench, so you give him some game time. And, beyond Eddie Nketiah, we don't really have a striker with Gabriel Jesus out. So the team was pretty much as I had expected it to be, I don't think necessarily the team itself or the team selection was the issue. It's not as if these guys didn't cost Arsenal a lot of money, and you look at the money Arsenal paid for Vieira, for Havertz, for Trossard, for Jorginho. I know he's sort of an experienced player in the September of his career, but, I thought this was a fairly reasonable team to put out, albeit against a West Ham side that went pretty strong, it has to be said.
Yeah, on the morning show in the wake of the defeat, I calculated up how much that team cost, and it just came just under £300 million, and obviously it includes Nelson and Nketiah, who are Hale End graduates as well. So didn't cost us a penny in regards to a transfer fee. And there's this discussion, debate that fans sometimes have about how seriously Arsenal or even other teams, take this competition by rotating. But the reason why Arsenal invest so heavily in depth and in options is so that you're supposed to be able to rotate and not necessarily see as much of a drop off in your performance. But that obviously wasn't evident last night. Do you feel as though Arteta maybe needs to work out a way of rotating more efficiently? And what I mean by that is like maybe intersplicing more starting, and I'm thinking more in the forward line in particular, and maybe the midfield, in keeping, if available, because of fitness and stuff like that, more of those starting figures interspliced with those rotational figures.
Maybe, but he did it at the weekend against Sheffield United, and I know Sheffield United are not very good, but he still did it at the weekend. He kept that team. He brought some players in who he didn't expect to play, like maybe Havertz, like Kivior, Smith Rowe. So he did it, and it was effective for this one. I think it's the balance, isn't it, between you have a squad and you need a big squad, but you have to give players minutes. You have to give them time on the pitch in order to get the best out of them. And this competition is one where, we saw in the last round, he gave a debut to Charles Sago Jr. Nobody expected that. Nobody saw that coming. He did okay on the night and all the rest of it. But it is about balancing, how you use your squad with what you are facing in the Premier League. I mean, before the game, he was asked about, like, how much does Newcastle come into your thinking for this when it comes to team selection? He said, nothing. No. It's all about beating West Ham, which, is what he has to say publicly,
Sure.
But it's frankly a load of bollocks because, we saw that in the team selection. And if he's not thinking about Newcastle when he's picking this team, he's absolutely mad, which I don't think he is. So it's about, I think, what those players deliver when they are given chances. And you could make the argument that if you make that many changes, it's hard to find fluency and it's hard to find those connections and those relationships on the pitch. And I think that is a fair point. But another side of that might be that Arsenal train all day and train all week to play in a certain way. And the players that come in, have got to be able to step up to that level. If they want to push for involvement in the Premier League, they've got to be able to play the way the manager wants. And I don't even think it was about style of play so much when you come to his post-match press conference and his post-match comments. The first thing he said was, paraphrasing, but he used the word compete. And the way he said the word compete made it very clear that he felt his players did not compete in the duels and all the rest of it. So the lack of fluency is one thing, but I think the sort of, it's not a lack of effort. I don't think you can accuse any professional footballer of going out and just sort of going through the motions or not trying. I don't think that's what happened. But I do think that maybe there was an element of the players feeling like this game didn't matter as much as some of the others. And that's a weird thing because this competition is the only competition some of those players have been appearing in.
Yeah, and it's also the only competition that doesn't feature Manchester City that we play in as well. And it seemed as though, and I know fans have grasped this certainly and have a right to, that it seemed the most winnable of all the competitions we're in because Man City aren't in it. It's as simple as that. Obviously, people have put 2 and 2 together and seen that West Ham have got Liverpool away in the next round. It doesn't necessarily mean it would have worked out, whether you believe in fate and whether that would have been the same if Arsenal had been the draw instead of West Ham, who knows. But that is the draw that they got. And that draw obviously is, that game is going to be a few days before Arsenal would have travelled to Anfield to play Liverpool as well. And, I do always enjoy the clutching at positives after a defeat. And I think that certainly possibly is a genuine one we can look to, that there will be a significant rest of that week going into the game against Liverpool. I do want to pick up on a couple of individual performances And I saw your partner in crime, James, tweet in comedic fashion about Kai Havertz and about how long does saying 60 million down the drain go on before it doesn't become funny, which I know was a joke and intended as a joke. But I think that there is underlying truth to that as well, because although I was quite happy with his first half performance and some of the contributions he made during the game, I thought he was tenacious. He won some really good duels, and that was that free kick on the left-hand side. He did really, really well to win and then win a free kick in that position. Obviously, fans continue to have concerns about this deal. I called it a risk when we signed him. It doesn't feel yet like it's paying off. And I suppose the question to ask is, how long do you give it until it's classed as, I don't want to call it a failure so soon because it's October. It's very difficult not to start using those words.
I think it's very difficult not to be concerned at this point. Like, would he have been top of my list of signings this summer? No. Would I have paid that much money for him? Absolutely not. But I've sort of gone at it with the mindset of, well, Chelsea was a bit of a basket case club. Nobody really performed to a high level there over the last number of years. It might take him some time to settle into a new club and learn a new system and get connected with the players that we have. And I'm still sort of in that mindset, right? That I think it is relatively early days, but we're sufficiently far into the season right now for concerns about him as a player and his suitability for this team to be absolutely reasonable. I don't know what he is or where we're going to use him best or what he brings to the team. It's difficult to see. Like sometimes you bring in a player and you go, okay, like I can see if he gets up to speed on this, he might be somebody we can count on. Like Declan Rice is a perfect example. He can play as the 8, he can play as the 6. We know what he is. We know where he's going to play. We know what he's going to do, and we know how he's going to do it. I can't answer those questions about Kai Havertz. Is he a left 8? Not sure. Is he a wide player? Don't think so. Not in this team. Is he a center forward? Perhaps. Maybe that's where we've seen the best of him, but I even think that's sort of a stretch in a way because he played quite well in the Community Shield up there, and that's sort of really the only time we've seen him up there, bar like some late game changes where he's sort of seen out the last 15, 20 minutes up front. Like you, I thought he was quite bright in the first 15, 20 minutes. Had a header that was saved. He did win that free kick, as you said. He won some aerials. He won some tackles. And I was hoping, that this would be a game where he could build on that start. And he didn't, and he faded. And it was another fairly indifferent performance. I do think, being as fair as possible, that you can't say that about him last night and not mention that the same was true of Leandro Trossard, of Fabio Vieira, of Reece Nelson, of Eddie Nketiah. Did any of them do anything especially wrong or bad? No. But were they effective to the level that we needed them to be? No. And I think he was one of those. I don't think he was especially bad, but he absolutely faded in this game. And, given that he has made, 10, 12, 13 appearances now for the club, you say it out loud and it still seems very soon. But I don't, from all the fans that I speak to, and I'm sure you're the same, and you see the comments in your YouTube and I see them on my website and all the rest of it, that I don't think there's anybody out there who doesn't have some worry about Kai Havertz at this point. And, I hope we could have a conversation in 3 months' time or 6 months' time when we're going, remember that when we were really worried about him and then he burst into life. I hope that's what we get. But, I don't know how it's going to happen.
No, and we have to be honest. You can't just always be like, we've got to be patient, because you have to be analytical and critical. And I think that's fair. And for me, it's not even like I can't be annoyed at Havertz as a player for what he offers, because like the club have signed him based upon what they've seen the last 3 years. And what we've seen the last 3 years is, yes, a Champions League winning goal, which was great. But if you speak to any Chelsea supporter, they don't speak about him in terms which there are no downsides. There is a lot of concern and was concern throughout his time at Chelsea. And so The issue I've got is with the Havertz deal is that I felt like we took a risk in a deal that we didn't need to. There was a lot of money there that could have been used when Arsenal were on the up, just competed for a title, came very close to that. You're now in a position in a summer transfer window where you want to try and take that next step. And we've done a deal for Declan Rice, which is a type of player who, again, is on the up, at the top of their game so far in their career, on the up, and they're coming to a team to take that next step. Jurrien Timber, despite the fact he's not here, again, another player, done really great things with Ajax, young player, on the up, improving all the time, comes to another team to take his game to another level. Even David Raya, to some degree, even though he's had his own struggles and question marks, again, another player that's impressed in the Premier League, on the way up and moving to the Arsenal to take that next step. Into midfield was with losing Granit Xhaka, a really important player, was such a key area that we had to make sure that we added depth and strength and variety to. We did that with Rice, of course, with quality. But it's the Havertz thing for me is always about we took a risk when we didn't need to. And that's why I find myself frustrated with that deal.
Maybe, I think managers, I don't know if this is the case, but managers sometimes love a project player, a player that they see, they've got a perception of, obviously, from their time working in the game and from the people they talk to in the game, and there's no question that the Havertz in Germany and the Havertz in London were two very different players. He was a very exciting prospect when he left Germany, but that wasn't the case at Chelsea. And I just wonder if, they thought they could unlock something in him by putting him into this team and surrounding him with the players that we have that we haven't seen with. Like, I think there have been far more hits than misses when it comes to our recruitment over the last 2 years, right? And I think everybody would accept that. You're not going to win everyone, but I think Arsenal's record, the judgment of Arteta and Edu stands up to fairly close scrutiny in that regard. So I'd love to know what it was they thought they were going to get from Kai Havertz and maybe why we haven't seen it yet. Is that to do with the way we're playing? Is it to do with his lack of confidence? I think the other thing with Havertz is that he's a fairly languid guy, right? He's you mentioned that bit where he won that tackle and won the free kick. And, I did see it. I saw it with my own eyes. I saw a player who put himself about a bit in that opening part of the game, who was maybe a little more aggressive in his movement on the ball and off the ball. But by the time we got to midway through the second half, he wasn't competing. He wasn't winning tackles. He wasn't winning aerials. He was just sort of doing that thing, where, when a player just doesn't like it anymore. Yeah, but he's, there's the ball's coming in and he sort of backs in a little bit to the defender and doesn't really try. He's 6'4". He can win a lot of aerials and he has done, but I just don't see it, and I don't know what it is that we are going to get from him. And I hope we do. Like, again, I just really hope we do, because it's for everyone's benefit if he comes good for Arsenal. But it's just not happening at the moment.
No, it's not. I think I speak for the majority of Arsenal fans, certainly, that I hope it does. I know there's always that weird underlining of hoping that it doesn't, so that we can move on to something else quicker. But it's more beneficial for Arsenal that a £65 million investment turns good. Believe me, it is, because the impact that could have if it doesn't work out on future transfer windows, future signings, it could have an impact. The other areas of the field, I saw Clive put a tweet out yesterday talking about Ben White's throw-ins. Did you see? It was an interesting one, saying about how our throw-ins are something which aren't being focused on, but continually losing us possession. Let me see if I can find Clive's tweet on it yesterday. But there was something to do with throw-ins specifically.
Right.
But what did you make of Ben White in that performance? Obviously, the own goal was there, and we can debate about whether VAR should exist in this competition. I think it should, obviously. But what did you make of Ben White in this game?
I mean, I think as much as it was a foul on Aaron Ramsdale, and it absolutely is, and I think that's a goal that gets disallowed in the Premier League every single time because of the pull on his shirt. The other aspect is it was a really, really dangerous ball in from Jared Bowen. The trajectory on that ball is dangerous. It's not like a floaty corner. He really whipped that into the near post. So as a defender, if you commit to that, which he did, in fairness, he committed to making the clearance, he got it wrong. He got it wrong. It's like a goalkeeper letting one slip through his legs a little bit from a defensive point of view. And I love Ben White as much, if not more, than the next guy. But I think you do have to look at the way he defended that. Like he went for it, got it wrong. It's an own goal. I didn't notice the throw-in thing. Are there throw-in stats? Do we have FB
No, I have noticed that Clive's deleted this tweet, so he's entitled to do that, which means he may have reflected on his tweet and thought, well, maybe. So there you go.
I think the other thing about throw-ins is that they can be difficult at times.
Sure.
If you're playing against a team that's well organized, you as the throw-in guy, as the thrower, are completely reliant on your teammates. It's not so much to do with you as a guy who can throw the ball. It's like, who are you throwing it to, or where are you throwing it? And if nobody's moving, or there isn't sufficient movement ahead of you or inside of you to keep possession, there is nothing you can do, particularly in an era where you're running the risk of getting a yellow card if the referee thinks you're delaying. Like, very few people actually waste time at throw-ins. Like, no, how you waste time? You waste time by, going down injured, or your goalkeeper taking ages over a goal kick, or there's countless ways you can do it. But taking throw-ins is not really a way of wasting time. I think the biggest sin that people make or do when taking throw-ins is they steal yards. I think we saw it last night when one of the West Ham guys, was made go back by the referee, and then by the time he'd taken the throw in, he was about 5 yards further forward than where the referee had told him to go back from. So, ultimately, if you're worried about that, all you can do is chuck it down the line and hope. And I'm not sure that should reflect as much on the thrower as the people, the other teammates, and also the nonsensical, arbitrary rules or edicts from the PGMOL that nobody quite understands how long you've got to take a throw in.
There's a great example on the opposite side. I think it was when right toward the end of the game where a ball went out for Arsenal off the corner flag, and we took the throw in about 8 or 10 yards to the left of the corner flag. Like, you can't get a more specific placement for a throw in, and
but you can come back. I mean, that's the thing. You can come back. It's when you're sort of on halfway, and then you take the throw in halfway into the opposition's half.
Sure.
I think that's the one that annoys me. Well, it doesn't really annoy me.
Yeah, the reason why I saw that tweet, there was a reply I just found to the now deleted Clive tweet. We see you, Clive, by the way. This is not specific to why Arsenal play, says. None of our players display that intent and urgency from throw-ins, corners, or free kicks. Last season, Partey was one of the few who attempted to wipe the ball dry and go for a long throw-in. We are too focused on technical skills, and we need more rawness. I'm not sure I agree with the last part, but what I will ask about kind of the approach, this will be the final question before we look ahead a bit to Newcastle, is that I felt last night there was an obvious intent of the patience that Arteta wants from his team when he plays. Like, it's about control, it's about dominance. There was a moment where Ramsdale went to kick the ball long and then didn't. And as soon as he did that, with the benefit of being inside the stadium, I looked to Arteta, and you could see him gesticulating to calm down, to keep the ball on the floor and play. So that's what he wants. But is there an argument that maybe in moments where we go a goal down, again, I think when you're 1 goal down, I think you can still display that patience because you're still very much in the game. But when the game goes to 2 or to 3, I never sensed like an increase in gear, if you like, from that team, and that patience remained. And I think there was nothing that demonstrated it perfectly than the fact that the goal came for Arsenal in a very Arsenal way for Odegaard, but it came into injury time when it was far too late. And I felt that symbolised maybe the lack of urgency that we need sometimes.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I think the flip side of that is like, what is urgency in terms of how it's perceived by fans? Does that mean getting the ball forward quickly?
Yes, I mean more direct, I suppose.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but if you go more direct, West Ham are just going to win headers and get rid of it. I think the idea of sticking to your principles is in general is a good one. Like you, I would have been happy to see a bit more urgency, a bit more movement. The goal came, maybe it was like right at the end, West Ham switched off, and there's probably an element of that to it, but sharp movement, someone making a run in behind, somebody finding an incisive pass rather than passing it straight to an opposition player. After the third goal went in, Arsenal had more or less 80% possession in this game. Did we do enough with it? Absolutely not. But at that point, it's like a training game for West Ham. It's a training session, defensive training session. Stay deep, stay organized, let them have it, cut off the passing lanes and see what they can do. And I think, the issue isn't so much the fact that we didn't get the ball forward quickly enough. It's that we didn't do enough with it once we got into the West Ham half. And once we got into the West Ham final third, there was not enough bravery in the passing, not enough creativity, not enough craft. And it's not as if Fabio Vieira can't pick a pass. It's not as if Martinelli and Saka can't contribute from the wide areas, but they'd come on. Obviously, Arteta had really gone for it after putting Rice and Tomiyasu on. I just think the sort of context of the game, it's 3-0, it's away from home, it is the EFL Cup. I would expect to see a bit more in a Premier League game, and I'm not excusing it, and I don't think it's right the players should prioritize. I'm not even sure they did that. I just think it was a bad night and a bad second half from Arsenal, because the first half, even though we went in behind, I don't think we were brilliant, but we weren't bad.
No.
We were actively bad in the second half. And I know we've had some concerns about how we play this season. Maybe the first half against Chelsea was something in that kind of ballpark, but this is maybe the worst that we've played in a half that I can remember. This season, we just didn't really look like scoring a goal. We just didn't. And when the goal came in the end, it was like, that's actually a bit annoying. I'd much rather have lost 3-0 than 3-1, because the 3-1 showed you that with a bit more vim in the way we built up, we were capable of hurting them. So
yeah, I felt a lot of links to the Forest away game when we lost 1-0 and the Brighton home game when we lost 3-0. I felt there was a lot of similarities between those types of performances, which is ironic because those games really mattered in the context of the Premier League, of course, whereas this, not that it didn't matter again, but it's obviously a different context. So Newcastle make a huge number of changes to their first team and sail past Manchester United without too much of an issue. All the ironies are available. How are you feeling going into that game? Because obviously we're expecting a stronger team. Obviously we're expecting Saka and Odegaard and Martinelli and Rice and probably Tomiyasu over Zinchenko as well on that left-hand side to come back in. And Newcastle have had a mixed start to the season. It has not been as good as it was last season, even though they are up there, obviously, and they've had some big results like against PSG, but then disappointed in that game against Dortmund. And so without some key players like Isaac and Murphy's not going to be there as well. Tonali, of course, is banned. They've got a few other injuries like Barnes too. How are you feeling ahead of this one?
I mean, I think this is perhaps the most difficult physical game of the season. Newcastle away at St. James's Park. We know what they're about. Look, they've got a lot of talent, but what they also have is a lot of energy and a lot of physicality, a lot of running power. And I think the team that we pick is going to have to be based on that. We're going to have to match them stride for stride in this game, as we did, I think, last season. We dealt with what they were dishing out physically, and we were good enough in the final third to get the couple of goals that we needed to score them and take all 3 points. My sort of fear is not quite the right word, because I think the team basically picks itself.
Yeah.
In terms of, who we have available. You bring Rice back in, you bring Saliba back in, Raya comes back in. I think Tomiyasu didn't start last night because he's going to start away at Newcastle. That seems like the most, Tomiyasu game for me. And then it's about midfield. And I think Martin Odegaard will come back in. He showed last night that he was moving okay. Saka, Martinelli, Eddie. There's who plays in that left eight. Who plays in there that is going to be able to physically deal with what Newcastle offer, not necessarily defensively, but when they break or when the game is in transition, do we have the legs to be able to get back? And I'm not quite sure who I would pick in there.
I think I'd go Jorginho Rice. Jorginho had an excellent game last year at Newcastle. Go on, sorry.
No, I would. That would exacerbate my fears. I think Jorginho is a very tidy player. If you look at the stats last night, I think he passed at something like 97%. It's when West Ham upped the intensity straight away in the second half. Paquetá robbed him, drove on. Jorginho couldn't get back. And actually, I thought he did pretty well with some of the physical challenges in midfield. He won some free kicks. He's smart, all the rest of it. But I think what happened was, as soon as he got overwhelmed in that moment, that transmitted itself to the rest of the team. And I would worry that in the big open spaces of St. James's Park, that might just be too big a stretch for him, and legs which over 5 yards, 10 yards are grand, but over 30 yards and 40 yards, I'd have some worries there.
You know what my question is, though? It's who?
I don't know. I don't know.
So, I mean, we've got the options. You got Havertz, you've got Vieira. I don't expect Smith Rowe to be back because of this knee issue, which is a real blow, which we haven't touched upon. But you know, it is what it is. It's a real blow. Some people might suggest, and I know Paul Vision has suggested this before in the past, Trossard as an internal player. I just think that unless I'm forgetting a glaring option, it's between Jorginho. Obviously Rice gets picked, but it's between Jorginho, Havertz, and Vieira as your choices. Am I forgetting? Could you play Zinchenko in there?
It's possible. I mean,
it won't happen, but
I don't think it will happen. I mean, the one that, this is going to sound mad because he's so effective where he is. Like, could you move Bukayo Saka into that position for a game like this? Like, I don't expect that to happen.
Who would you play on the right then?
I think you could maybe play with Trossard on the left and Martinelli on the right.
Yeah.
Let Martinelli run Trippier. I don't know. I mean, that's just me. I think
this demonstrative of the issue that we have when Partey is out, is that we're pulling hairs this much because of
Yeah,
and
I think you could be right. I think you could be right. I think it could be Jorginho, Rice, Odegaard, because it is the most experienced, and that's the midfield that played against Manchester City, of course. So it might well be that. I just worry a bit about Jorginho, but I think the options at left 8 are such that maybe there's no other choice for the manager in a game like this. That Rice has got that running power. He's got that physicality. You could, the Jorginho at 6 could easily become 2 6s with Rice and Jorginho. You know what I mean? So you play a kind of double pivot there, and you've got Odegaard ahead of them. It's then how you connect to that left-hand side, how you connect to Martinelli. So yeah, it's not ideal, and I think this is a conversation that will continue throughout this season. In the absence of Partey, whose injury record is a frustration and a worry, that the left 8 position remains the big question mark about this team, particularly as we've spoken about, a bit earlier on. The Havertz thing is as up in the air as it is,
Yeah, I was just looking at who was in the midfield last time, along with Jorginho, and obviously it was Granit Xhaka, who I can't help but miss so much this season. The idea of Rice and Xhaka playing together is something I would have loved to have seen, and what that was feasible of. But the idea was about evolution and moving forwards. It's just, again, it segues and circles back to that Havertz conversation again, and who will start. I guess we'll have to wait and see. I'm going to finish the show and be really, really mean and ask for a prediction for Saturday.
I'm going to go for...
I'm sensing unrivaled confidence from you, Andrew, with this.
Look, we've been good in the league. We haven't lost a game in the league. I think, even if our football hasn't been quite as stellar as we would like, I think what we've shown is that we are a tough team to beat. And I hope we can show that again on Saturday. We did not show that against West Ham. We were easy to beat. I have a very strong suspicion that there were some harsh words from the manager, both, at halftime, maybe not so much at halftime, but certainly at the end and on the bus home. you know, he probably didn't let them listen to the music they want to listen to on the way home. You know,
would have been a quiet bus ride.
Yeah, quiet bus ride. Nobody talk. It's not far. Then you can all go home and think about what you've done, or not done. And I think there will be, you know, a fair amount of work going in over the next couple of days on the training road to make sure that that kind of performance is not replicated. However, I do think Newcastle have something a little bit extra at St. James's Park. So I'm going to go for a draw in this one, maybe a 1-1 or a 2-2. But I hope
if I offered you a draw, would you take it?
No, I'd never take it because there's a part of me that's optimistic that we can win a game. It depends on the context. If you'd offered me a draw against Chelsea at 76 minutes the other week, I absolutely would have taken it, no problem. But you know, maybe it's one of those games you can nick. And you know, I hope on Saturday evening or Sunday morning we're sitting around and we're talking about things in a much more positive way. And you know, this sort of disappointment against West Ham has been, if not forgotten, you know, easily compartmentalized by the fact we've won a good game away from home. But I think it's going to be very tough. A draw wouldn't be a bad result, I don't think, away from home, but let's see. We maybe need a bit of magic from somebody, whether that's Saka or Martinelli, or maybe a fit again Martin Odegaard, who scored the goal there last season. So let's hope we can do that.
Yeah, he did provide the magic last year. And resilience in defence is going to be paramount, and probably a little bit of luck as well going our way, which we got last year with the VAR Kivior incident too. Which
forgotten about that one.
Yeah, it's quickly forgotten now, you know, these incidents. But no, it's going to be, it's exciting. I'm looking forward. I say looking forward to going out. I'll tell you what, my ears last time were punished. It is an incredibly loud stadium. It's like, I was in Lawns earlier this year, and that was an amazing atmosphere. But it's like St. James's Park actually hurts you. It's that loud. Like it's a joke.
Bring your headphones.
Yes, yeah, I will. This is a good strategy. Andrew, thank you so much for your time this morning. I really, really appreciate it. Tell people they can find you and what you're going to be up to.
Arseblog.com. That's where everything is. You can find me there, find all the podcasts and the news and all the rest of it. So, yeah, that's it. Pleasure as always, Tom. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Listeners, as Andrew says, you can check him out on Arseblog. Fantastic Arsecast, of course, with James, and extra content as well on the Patreon as well. If you'd like to get that additional content and need more of your minutes in your day field, I'd certainly recommend it. We'll be back, of course, tomorrow. I'll be, of course, presenting it just before travelling up to Newcastle. I still need to check the times of trains and stuff, but with it being a frustratingly late game on a Saturday to go up to Newcastle, I think we should be fine. And then, of course, we'll have the reaction up in Newcastle Sunday morning. Do drop a like on the video, subscribe, all that lovely YouTube-y stuff, and we will see you again very, very soon. And as always, up the Arsenal.